Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And I've been fishing around on the Dragonflight Alpha, trying some of the specializations that I'm known for. I've played Balanced Druid for I don't even know how many years, and it's going to make me feel old if I really think and accurately put a number on it. So I'm not going to go that far back, but I have a lot of experience with the Balanced Druid specialization. It's one that I would hold dear to my heart, so it's a spec that I hope to be a lot of fun moving forward into Dragonflight. And I just wanted to cover some of my initial thoughts, look at the spells and abilities that we are going to be having currently moving forward from the alpha. It seems like they are still willing to make some changes, with Unholy Death Knights receiving a massive sweep of changes and buffs and improvements to the classes. I'll link to that video at the end of this one. So I do hope that by the end of this video or throughout this stage of the alpha that the Balanced Druid does receive some attention as well. I've seen some other players, even on the other side of the fence in PvE, raising concerns with the talent tree and abilities that are moving forward for Balanced Druid as well. But I just wanted to talk about mine overall. So for the Balanced Druid, you're going to have a normal Druid talent tree. And unfortunately, a large portion of this tree just kind of feels like getting abilities that were otherwise baseline. And it's not really the best feeling overall. It's things like Typhoon, where it's like it's off to the side, it's on its own point. You have to go out of your way to get it. Cyclone, same thing, go out of your way. It's not connected to anything else that's kind of throughput oriented or survivability oriented. So, for example, as a Balanced Druid in PvP, having Frenzied Regeneration is very important for personal survivability. If you try to play a Balanced Druid without Guardian Affinity, which is basically what going through these talents on this tree is, yeah, you're not basically going to be able to do very much in PvP. So a lot of these talents you kind of just have to take and fill in order to be able to be competitive. And there are other options towards the bottom of the tree that just kind of give you flat throughput. So things like 6% stats when you're not in form, you get haste. When you're in bear, you get verse for extra survivability. When you're in moonkin, you get mastery. So you're going to be getting way more damage from this. So it feels a little bit mandatory to go after. The main concerns, like I said, are these things that are off to the side that aren't connected to anything that were otherwise baseline. Things like Hibernate, things like Typhoon, Cyclone, in a way, even things like Dispel. Like you're going to have to opt to go for Dispel or trade some personal survivability. Now, of course, at max level, you will have a little bit more talents, so it is likely you'll be able to get into those, but then possibly losing Innervate. You're not really, for me, at least in PvP, it doesn't feel like I'm going to be able to even take advantage of the capstone talents that are at the bottom, because I'm going to be too busy trying to get like core abilities towards playing. There are some situations where you're not going to need to have Remove Corruption, and you'll get away with not running it and picking up some crazy talent instead. But then into the other matchups where you have to have it, I'm thinking for like Hex teams mostly, or poison effects, you're gonna have to go after it. So I'm a little bit disappointed with how many of these talents are just offset. I would almost rather these just kind of like Hibernate be baseline, or Typhoon be baseline. Maybe Hibernate, because Typhoon has always been kind of historically it's something that you talent for as the other specializations. But something like Hibernate, where it's like off to the side, it's not a big deal if it's just baseline. It's just kind of taking up an extra point that is otherwise going to be needed for taking these defensive oriented ones in PvP, would be better. I feel like there was a lot of overhype about things like Skull Bash. Myself personally, I don't really see myself running this. Maybe again someone clips this and comes back to bite me and I'm playing Skull Bash every game all of a sudden. But because of how vital and powerful some of these are, like you've got to get your Bash, you've got to get your Auto Frenzy, you got to get your Root Solar Beam, you need to get your Stampeding Roar back, your Wild Charge, and maybe some Balanced Druids won't go for these spells, but like these are my favorite spells for Druid. Is like Wild Charge for jumping around the map, Stampede for getting some of these extra sprint effects onto my allies. Like if you've watched any of my high rated PvP videos, I'm always looking for opportunities to sneak these spells in to get my teammates to somewhere important on the field. So like not having these to try and pick up something else is just, it's not going to work for me at least. So it seems like there's a little bit too many of these talents that are off to the side that I'd like to see readjusted as I've been playing through. Now, of course, I am building these talents as if the game is going to be tuned similarly to how Shadowlands is, to where you're kind of trying to bear form stuns and tank and frenzied regen. So maybe the tuning could readjust that, but it did feel like there was quite a few talents. I'd rather maybe there be talents that amplify Stampeding Roar. Like maybe we have a baseline Stampeding Roar, even if it's half as effective, and then you're talenting to get the full effectiveness of it, so you still have some of that gameplay that you can use for your allies and assist, and you're not losing all of it, rather than the baseline ability itself. Because it feels like you have to go out of your way to get it. Similarly, again, with the Death Knight talent trees, if Hibernate was more well connected into something I needed down in the middle, I'd feel a lot less bad about getting it by having to go off to the side to get it. And that was my main criticism for the baseline Druid talents. The other one was that I wasn't really excited about a lot of them. Like Heart of the Wild always ends up being kind of gimmicky, and I don't normally go for it. I think back in Mists of Pandaria, they added like a passive on top of it, which is like flat stats, which made it more desirable. So you can get like this cool Heart of the Wild moment as an off support, but then it had some value outside of that, which it doesn't anymore. This one, Furor, did initially seem kind of interesting to me. So once you were out of a form and you shapeshifted into it, you would get basically free cost of whatever resource it was. But I don't know how often you're going to spend 15 seconds out of Moonkin form, and like tracking that number in your head is really tough to do. So I don't know if there's a way that they could show a tracker for this. But again, spending 15 seconds to wait, maybe sometimes it's good. Like you load up a full astral power bar, you run away in travel form for 15 seconds, and then you shapeshift back in, and you can pump out 4 seconds of star surges, and then follow through with your entire astral bar, which could be good, but it's just kind of awkward with the 15 seconds. And then Nature's Vigil, honestly, was kind of one of the more boring talents that I've played with as a balanced druid. It's just kind of like it's basically Vampiric Embrace from Shadow Priest copy pasted over, where all your damage is just going to do healing. It can be great support. I'm sure it's going to be really powerful, possibly even as something like a raid cooldown. But in PvP, is it going to be as valuable as some of these other options, like a Typhoon for a knockback, Stampede for a sprint? I'm not too sure. But on Balanced Druid especially, I feel like a lot of these things would just be better baseline or be better interconnected, like maybe Cyclone connects into that. Something along these lines, so that I can get access to more of these talents. But yeah, that's basically my initial assessment for the Druid talent points. For the balanced Druid specific ones over here on the right, I was hoping that it was going to end up in a place like Evoker, where you've got one side that's single target oriented, one side that's oriented to area of effect. So you'd have like a Starfall option and then a Star Surge option, and you could build your Boomkin to be maybe a mix of those, or to go all in on AoE or all in on single target. That's what I was really hoping for balanced druids, myself personally, was similar to the Evoker. But unfortunately, with the way that it has been laid out, is that you have Starfall, but Starfall leads into a bunch of Starfall talents, but then the capstone ones are all oriented towards Star Surge, like Dreambinder or Fury of Elune. They don't, it's like counterintuitive. You're starting off like this, it's like, oh, I'm picking Starfall talents, I'm going to go for AoE, but then halfway through at the end, it's suddenly I'm picking single target ones. Whereas on the other side, it does stay fairly consistent, focusing around shooting stars, focusing around giving you haste, focusing around giving you more shooting star procs, which does capstone off really nicely with Orbit Breaker, giving you kind of the 15th. This has been one of my most fun talents so far that I've tried. So every 15th shooting star that's called, you'll get just a full moon on the target, blasting for huge damage. It's actually really fun when it just kind of comes. You're not sure if you're going to expect it, and suddenly out of nowhere, you're just calling down a planet on somebody's head. It was actually very fun. And personally, one of my favorite abilities from Shadowlands is the Adaptive Swarm with a Starfall build and having this dot damage out. I'm sure a lot of you that follow my videos have seen that content, and Circle of Life and Death leading into it makes a lot of sense. So this right wing of the talents makes a lot of sense to me. It could be that they're intending for you to go Starfall towards the top end and maybe not connect in here, or maybe go here for the Star Surge ones, but then it doesn't get you to Time Worn Dreambinder, which is the one that you would want to get to if you were going to try and build something to do with Star Surge. A lot of these center talents are more or less conduits from Shadowlands that I think even in PvE, correct me if I'm wrong, even in PvE, a lot of players weren't taking. So things like Eclipse's damage bonus starts stronger, or they have a 1% chance of empowering the other one. And these were kind of the conduits that nobody ever took. They weren't interesting, and they were just kind of like slotted here for the sake of slotting them here. So I wasn't really super excited about that. Towards the top end, you do get a bit of choice in terms of like Force of Nature versus Warrior of Elune. But again, as like a personal preference, preference, at least for myself. I've never really enjoyed running Warrior of Elune, at least when it comes to PvP. It's always just felt like a cumbersome global you got to access in order to get Starfires out. Maybe I'll come back to like it. I'm not too sure. Things like Stellar Flare too, just not a big fan of these abilities for a long time. I almost would have rather these talents just go away and we get something new in their place to have something more exciting, because basically the only new stuff we're getting are all passives. With this full moon breaking down and power of Goldrin giving you a star Goldrin when it shoots a Star Surge. This has been really lackluster in terms of power. Again, we're really early in the alpha, so hopefully the tuning will come through. But the main goal that I would have preferred for the Balanced Druid tree was to have this Starfall tree option focusing on AoE, and then maybe a Star Surge tree option, and then maybe even a hard casted spells where like Wrath and Starfire are getting buffed. So maybe you've got a single target casted build you can go for, an AoE Starfall dot build you can go for, or a Star Surge burst setup build, and that's how I would have liked to have the trees unfold. But right now the middle ones just feel like a bunch of filler that were just kind of thrown there because they were just pre-existing passives that maybe were readily available, and it doesn't feel like there's as much specific tailoring as things like the Evoker talent tree towards the focus of like a build being on one wing and an AoE build being on the other wing. So I'd really like to see these talents looked at a second time. Again, that's my preference. I would like that approach, not thinking that it would be the absolute best or maybe the only way of going about it, but the way that I want to be able to play my Boomy is customize it to be single target, hard casted, or instant burst damage, and playing around with those types of different loadouts and builds personally. As I've been kind of questing, playing through the zone and doing duels, I mean, tuning is one thing. The questing has felt really smooth. You're going to level really easily as Balanced Druid, I think, especially because you can get Force of Nature for your little treant buddies to be able to taunt targets and move forward. And I was just focusing on kind of the Starfall build because it's really good at just AoEing mobs, and it's just really fun. I really like Starfall. I love the Adaptive Swarm build with it, keeping dots up on multiple targets, kiting around and trying to blast them with as much damage as possible. So I do hope by the end of this and Dragonflight has been released that the Starfall build is going to actually be a competitive option. That's kind of my biggest goal. But we talked about the pros and the cons. Really like this part of the tree. The right side of it makes a lot of sense. Middle part, not so much. And then the disconnect between the Starfall talents with like some of the best Star Surge ones at the bottom doesn't seem consistent for me. And I'm going to really miss losing things like Hibernate, and don't like how they're kind of just like off on their own wing and not interconnected to something that I feel like is going to be mandatory in the game. So hopefully we get some max level characters. I feel like that's probably not happening until they've got all the talent trees out, at least, so that I can get a feel for the max level PvP, if these bear form talents are mandatory or if it is possible to experiment with Skull Bash. I feel like you're going really off by experimenting into MAME and stuff like that, but we'll have to wait and see. I'd really like some of these more boring passive ones that I don't think anyone even played in any aspect of the game to just get removed and put some new stuff in there, or some old really fun stuff that was old back into the Boomy tree, so I can be like as excited about the whole thing as I am with some other classes. But aside from that, that is my initial response. It's kind of a wait and see for balance tuning as to whether or not the way that I'm hoping to play my Boomkin is going to work out, but just wanted to give you some insight and commentary towards it and what it's looking like so far. So if you've enjoyed this video, please leave it a thumbs up, comment down below with your thoughts as well. Is Boomy looking like it's a strong pick for you? Do you like having this choice of all of this different utility, having to lose some keybinds to pick up other ones? Is that something that you would prefer personally? I know some players do like their keybinds reduced, so getting as many opinions as possible here to try and have the best impact on the game as we can. And if you want to stay tuned into all this types of content, then make sure you hit the subscribe button. It's just going to let you know when my videos go live. I do my best to relay updates, patch changes, news, guides, everything World of Warcraft, so you're ahead of the competition. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.